Welcome to Uncloseted Conversations. Even if you stumbled upon this channel by accident, you are welcome here. The stories here are from my heart, from my soul, from my pen to your ears. I hope that you will stay a little longer and open yourself to the magic of storytelling. Here I write fiction, and though not always aligning with reality, it still tugs at heartstrings. Stories are escapes and sometimes a balm to the soul. So, enjoy your time here, and if reality presses down too loud and too hard, come knock at the door, come in, take a seat, grab a coffee, and just exhale. These are veil-bound stories, and the space is free and non-judgmental. Sit back, earphones or pods in, and let's listen to another exquisite romance. Reina's ghost. She ruled an empire. She survived betrayal. But the woman who saved her was the one person she never saw coming. Chapter 1. Dead Queen Walking. Cattleya Pellegrini had approved her own murder at exactly 4:17 that afternoon. She signed the authorization with the same fountain pen she used to approve acquisitions worth billions. A single elegant stroke. No hesitation. No flourish. Her assistant accepted the folder without question. Anything else, Ms. Pellegrini? No. Your 6 o'clock has been moved to Thursday. Good. The charity gala seating plan has also been finalized. Excellent. The assistant smiled politely and disappeared, blissfully unaware that the woman behind the desk had just scheduled her own death. Cattleya leaned back in her chair and looked beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows of Pellegrini Global Holdings. The city glittered beneath her. Millions of lights. Millions of lives. Millions of decisions. Every one of them left a trail. Data never lied. People did. She reached for the small velvet box resting beside her laptop. Inside sat a diamond ring large enough to buy a neighborhood. She closed the lid again. No anger. No sadness. Only disappointment. Contracts were built on trust. Business. Politics. Marriage. Break one and the agreement ceased to exist. Her phone vibrated. Dr. Matteo Ricci. She answered immediately. Everything is in place. It has to be, he replied quietly. Silence lingered between them. I still dislike this plan. So do I. There are easier ways. They'll never believe another. Matteo sighed. They'll shoot to kill. I know. If they delay. I know. If I miss my window. You won't. Another silence. Finally, he said, You have exactly 1 minute, Kat. She smiled faintly. You've always been dramatic. I'm a doctor. Exactly. The call ended. Cattleya opened the bottom drawer of her desk. Inside, nestled in black velvet, rested a tiny crystal vial no larger than her thumb. White powder. Odorless. Harmless. Until it wasn't. One measured dose. A heart that would stop. 1 minute. No pulse. No breath. No heartbeat. Death convincing enough to fool everyone except the man who had designed it. She slipped the vial into the inside pocket of her tailored charcoal suit and closed the drawer. Outside, helicopters drifted lazily across the skyline. Inside, the CEO of a Fortune 500 technology empire calmly reviewed tomorrow's board agenda. There were quarterly forecasts to approve. A satellite launch in Singapore. 3 hostile takeover bids. 2 charitable foundations. And 1 assassination. Her calendar remained impeccably organized. By 9 that evening, Pellegrini Global Holdings had become a cathedral of silence. The final executives had gone home. The lights dimmed automatically across each floor. Cleaning crews emerged like quiet ghosts. Bins emptied. Glass polished. Coffee cups vanished. Nobody looked twice at the woman pushing the gray cleaning cart toward the executive suites. Lucia kept her head lowered. Oversized navy scrubs. Plain trainers. Hair tucked beneath a faded cap. Invisible. Exactly as intended. She paused beside the reception desk, glancing casually at the security monitors. Every camera. Every corridor. Every emergency exit. Routine. Always routine. A security guard wandered past carrying takeaway noodles. "Evening, Lucia." She offered a small smile. "Evening." He continued without another thought. He had worked in the building for 16 months. He had never once wondered why the cleaner always knew which elevators were out of service before maintenance announced them. Or why she never startled. Or why her cart was always positioned with a clear line to the nearest exit. Invisible people were rarely questioned. Lucia preferred it that way. She wheeled her cart into the executive corridor. Cataleya's office door stood closed. Dark. She frowned almost imperceptibly. Ms. Pellegrini never left paperwork overnight. Yet the access log she'd quietly memorized showed one final entry. 9:12 p.m. No exit. Perhaps she was still inside. She made a mental note and continued polishing the brass nameplate. Cataleya Pellegrini, Chief Executive Officer. Her reflection stared back at her for a heartbeat. Then she moved on. Across the city, beneath the skeletal frame of an abandoned shipping warehouse, black SUVs rolled silently into position. Headlights extinguished. Engines cooled. Men stepped into the darkness carrying enough firepower to start a war. Cataleya arrived alone. Exactly as expected. She stepped from her car wearing a perfectly tailored black suit. No visible weapon. No bodyguards. The rival boss laughed. "La Reina. Kovac. I expected an army. You overestimate your value." His smile faded. "I hear you've become soft. I hear you still believe rumors." Around them, boots shifted against cracked concrete. 21 armed men. She had counted them before leaving her vehicle. Kovac spread his arms. So, aren't you even curious why I asked for this meeting?" "No." His eyebrows lifted. "No, you wanted me where your snipers already are." Silence. One heartbeat. Two. His smile disappeared completely. "You knew." "I know many things." She slipped one hand casually into her pocket. Her fingers closed around the crystal vial. Somewhere beyond the warehouse walls, Matteo waited. Watching. Timing. Praying. Kovac's expression hardened. "Then you know who sold you." "I do. And? I'll deal with her." "You won't get the chance." He raised one finger. Gunfire exploded through the warehouse. Pain tore through Cataleya's ribs like fire. She staggered backwards. Blood bloomed across immaculate Italian wool. As she fell, she crushed the tiny vial between her teeth. The powder dissolved instantly. Her heartbeat thundered once. Twice. Then, nothing. Darkness. Absolute. Someone kicked her shoulder. No pulse. Another voice. "She's dead." Kovac crouched beside her body. "Funny," he muttered. "I expected more." Then, faintly. Sirens. Growing louder. Closer. A curse. "Police. Move." Boots pounded. Engines roared. Doors slammed. Silence reclaimed the warehouse. Somewhere nearby, a man began to run toward the woman lying motionless on the concrete. He had less than a minute to steal Death's prize back from her. And across the city, in an office tower wrapped in glass and steel, a quiet cleaner looked up from an empty corridor. For reasons she couldn't explain, something felt wrong. Chapter 2. The cleaner who didn't panic. The first thing Cataleya noticed was the smell. Not antiseptic. Not a hospital. Rosemary. Black pepper. Fresh bread. Someone was cooking. She opened her eyes one careful fraction at a time. A cream-colored ceiling. Soft morning light spilling through linen curtains. No machines. No security cameras. No marble. No steel. A home. Immediately, she tried to sit up. Pain answered before her muscles did. "Don't." The voice came from somewhere to her left. Calm. Matter of fact. Not a request. An instruction. Cataleya turned her head. The cleaner. Still dressed in plain clothes, though without the oversized work scrubs. Gray joggers. A black t-shirt. Bare feet. Sleeves rolled to her elbows as she stirred a pot on the stove. You collapsed yesterday. I was shot. That too. Catalea blinked. Humor. Unexpected. The woman carried on stirring as though discussing the weather. You have 3 fractured ribs, 1 through and through wound, significant blood loss, and you've been unconscious for just over 11 hours. You counted. I always count. Silence settled between them. The apartment wasn't large, but every object seemed intentional. Books arranged by height. Shoes lined up with military precision. A single ceramic mug drying upside down beside the sink. No photographs. No clutter. No unnecessary decoration. Nothing that spoke of the person who lived there. Only discipline. Catalea's eyes moved to the front door. 3 locks. A reinforced frame. The windows. Security film. The hallway mirror. Angled. Not decorative. It gave a perfect view of anyone approaching the apartment without exposing the person inside. Interesting. You've finished profiling my apartment. The cleaner hadn't looked up. Catalea raised an eyebrow. I wasn't aware I was obvious. You stopped looking at furniture 2 minutes ago. You noticed. I notice everything. The pot simmered quietly. So do I. I know. The cleaner finally turned. She carried a bowl of soup across the room and placed it on the coffee table before helping Catalea sit up with surprising gentleness. Not once did she touch the bandaged ribs. Every movement avoided the injuries before Catalea even winced. Professional. Very professional. Chicken, the woman said. Eat slowly. Catalea accepted the spoon. You cook. I dislike bad soup. That's oddly specific. It should be. The first spoonful stopped Catalea mid-thought. It was exceptional. Rich. Balanced. Comforting without being heavy. You look offended. I am. Why? I've eaten in Michelin-starred restaurants. And? This is better. The corner of the cleaner's mouth twitched. I'll try not to let the fame change me. For the first time in nearly 24 hours. Catalea laughed. It hurt immediately. She hissed. I warned you to move slowly. You neglected to warn me your soup was dangerous. It attacks unexpectedly. I noticed. The cleaner returned to the kitchen. No unnecessary conversation. No questions. No curiosity. Nothing. Most people, after discovering the infamous Reina bleeding across an office floor, would have demanded explanations. Who shot you? Who are you running from? Should I call the police? This woman. Made soup. That was somehow more unsettling. You haven't asked. No. Why? You'll tell me when it matters. You assume there'll be a when. The cleaner shrugged. I made enough soup for tomorrow. Silence. That was either optimism or strategy. Catalea couldn't decide which. She watched the woman rinse vegetables beneath running water. No wasted movement. Knife placed exactly where it had been before. Cup returned to precisely the same spot after every sip of coffee. Even the dish towel was folded into perfect thirds. Everything had a place. Everything. Military. The thought arrived quietly. Not because of the apartment. Because of the woman. The way she constantly faced the door. The way she never turned her back to open space. The way she scanned reflections instead of rooms. Tiny habits. Impossible to fake. Interesting. What is your name? The woman hesitated for the briefest heartbeat. Lucia. A surname? No. Everyone has a surname. I don't use mine. Catalea nodded once. Another answer that wasn't an answer. You already know mine. Everyone does. And yet you don't seem particularly impressed. Lucia looked genuinely puzzled. Should I be? I own the building where you work. You also bled on the carpet. Catalea stared. You looked at the carpet. It was expensive. It was. I'll get the stain out. Another silence. Then. You carried me here. Yes. I'm not exactly light. No. You managed alone? I had a trolley. Catalea almost smiled. Almost. You transported the most wanted woman in organized crime. Lucia nodded. Using office cleaning equipment. It has very good wheels. For the first time in years, Catalea found herself completely unable to predict another human being. She wasn't intimidated. She wasn't impressed. She wasn't frightened. She simply adapted. As though rescuing bleeding CEOs happened somewhere between vacuuming and emptying recycling bins. Lucia collected the empty bowl. You need sleep. I need answers. You need antibiotics. I dislike being told what I need. I've noticed. You aren't afraid of me. Lucia met her eyes for the first time since she'd awakened. They were an unexpected shade of storm gray. Steady. Unreadable. I've survived Marines. Catalea frowned. What? A beat passed. Lucia blinked once. I said I've survived mornings. Silence. Then she pointed toward the bedroom. You misheard. Catalea held her gaze a second longer. Perhaps she had. Perhaps she hadn't. Lucia disappeared down the short hallway with the empty bowl. As she rounded the corner, she caught her own reflection in the hallway mirror. She exhaled quietly. Careful. One careless sentence. One old habit. One piece of a life she no longer officially possessed. 2 years of invisibility could unravel that quickly. Behind her, Catalea looked once more around the apartment. 3 locks. No photographs. Military corners on the folded blankets. Books arranged by height. A first aid kit that looked better stocked than some emergency rooms. And a cleaner, who had just accidentally admitted she'd survived Marines. No, Catalea thought as sleep slowly reclaimed her. Not a cleaner. Not even close. Chapter 3. Invisible Things. By sunrise, Catalea Pellegrini was officially dead. Not legally. Not publicly. But in the places where truth mattered less than speed. Encrypted group chats erupted first. Reina is down. Confirmed. Body recovered. Pellegrini Empire is leaderless. Within an hour, rival syndicates began dividing territory they hadn't yet earned. By breakfast, cryptocurrency wallets shifted billions across anonymous accounts. 3 politicians quietly canceled meetings. 2 hedge funds began short-selling Pellegrini Global Holdings. Somewhere in Eastern Europe, a hacker accepted payment to breach Pellegrini's encrypted networks. Everyone wanted a piece of a kingdom whose queen had supposedly fallen. Exactly as Catalea had predicted. The apartment remained blissfully ignorant. A kettle whistled. Bread toasted. Someone hummed quietly while watering a basil plant on the windowsill. Catalea watched from the bedroom doorway. Lucia stood barefoot in the kitchen, sunlight catching loose strands of dark hair she'd failed to tuck behind her ears. She wasn't dressed for work. Dark jeans. A faded charcoal jersey. Comfortable. Ordinary. The sort of woman you'd pass in a supermarket and forget before reaching the next aisle. Invisible. She placed a mug on the table without looking up. You shouldn't be standing. I've been informed. You ignored the information. I often do. I've noticed. The exchange had become strangely comfortable. Catalea disliked how much she noticed that. She crossed the room carefully, lowering herself into a chair with considerably less grace than she would have preferred. Lucia pretended not to see. A kindness disguised as indifference. You made coffee. I did. It smells terrible. It is. Then why make it? Lucia took a sip. It wakes me up. Catalea stared. That's your standard? My standards for coffee and people are entirely different. Despite herself, Catalea laughed. The laugh dissolved into a grimace as her ribs protested. Lucia slid a small bottle of pain medication across the table. Before the coffee. You anticipated that. You keep forgetting you're injured. I dislike limitations. Your ribs are indifferent to your opinions. Another impossible observation. Lucia never sounded impressed. never intimidated. She simply stated facts. Once breakfast was over, Lucia disappeared into the bedroom. She returned moments later carrying a folded newspaper. Not a tablet. Not a laptop. Paper. Catalea accepted it with mild surprise. The front page carried a photograph taken months earlier. A charity gala. She and her fiancé smiling beneath chandeliers. The headline occupied nearly half the page. Tech billionaire missing after late-night shooting. Missing. Not dead. Good. The police hadn't recovered a body. Not yet. Her eyes skimmed the article. The board of directors had called an emergency meeting. Stock prices had dropped 9% before trading was temporarily halted. Journalists had gathered outside Pellegrini Tower. Security had doubled. Her fiancé had given an emotional statement. Catalea read it twice. Catalea dedicated her life to innovation and peace. We remain hopeful she will be found. She folded the newspaper neatly. Convincing. Lucia looked up. You don't believe her. I know her. You sound disappointed. I am. Lucia didn't ask why. Instead, she opened a cupboard. Inside sat 6 identical plastic containers. Rice. Beans. Pasta. Oats. Each labeled. Each dated. Each facing exactly the same direction. Catalea watched with growing fascination. You alphabetized your spices. Lucia paused. Yes. You rotated the labels outward. Yes. You folded your dishcloth into thirds. Yes. You sharpen your kitchen knives every Tuesday. Lucia stopped completely. Slowly. Very slowly. She turned around. How did you know that? The whetstone has fresh residue. Silence. The edge angles are identical. More silence. And today's Tuesday. Lucia blinked once. Then nodded. Fair. For the first time, they regarded one another as equals. One woman observed human behavior. The other observed everything else. Interesting. By midday, Catalea's strength had returned enough to wander the apartment. There wasn't much to see. One bedroom. One bathroom. Kitchen. Living room. Bookshelves. She stopped in front of the books. Military history. Psychology. Trauma recovery. Emergency medicine. Engineering. Italian cookbooks. Not a single novel. Curious. You don't read fiction? Lucia, washing dishes, answered without turning. I live with enough people pretending. That answer lingered longer than either of them expected. Catalea's phone remained switched off. Every instinct urged her to power it on. To access encrypted servers. Review security footage. Freeze accounts. Launch countermeasures. Instead, she sat, watching, learning. The woman called Lucia moved through the apartment with quiet efficiency. She never rushed, never fidgeted, never checked her phone every 30 seconds like most people. When she cleaned the kitchen, it wasn't obsessive. It was tactical. Back to the wall. Eyes on the entrance. Corners first. Windows second. Exit route always clear. Invisible habits. The kind that became part of muscle memory after years of surviving dangerous places. Not learned. Lived. Late that afternoon, a sharp knock echoed through the apartment. Exactly 3 knocks. Evenly spaced. Lucia froze. Not visibly. To anyone else, she'd merely stopped wiping the counter. To Catalea, time shifted. The dish towel disappeared beneath the sink. Her posture changed by a fraction. Weight transferred onto the balls of her feet. Her breathing slowed. Every line of her body became ready, not frightened, prepared. Then, just as quickly, she relaxed, opening the door only as far as the security chain allowed. An elderly neighbor smiled warmly. I baked too many muffins. Lucia accepted the plate. Thank you. And your cousin? Recovering. I'm glad. The door closed. Lucia carried the muffins inside. Catalea raised an eyebrow. Your cousin. It was simpler. You lie remarkably well. Lucia placed the plate on the counter. I tell people the version that requires the fewest follow-up questions. That's actually brilliant. I know. That evening, rain tapped softly against the windows. Catalea stood near the glass, watching the city she ruled continue without her. Traffic flowed. Helicopters crossed the skyline. Somewhere, her enemies celebrated. Somewhere else, her grandmother undoubtedly already knew she was alive. Because Nana always knew. Behind her, Lucia quietly folded laundry. No television. No music. Just comfortable silence. Catalea realized something that unsettled her more than the bullets had. For the first time in years, nobody wanted anything from her. No report. No signature. No decision. No performance. No title. To Lucia, she wasn't Reina. She wasn't the CEO. She wasn't a billionaire. She was simply a woman with broken ribs who needed soup, antibiotics, and several more days of healing. It was an oddly unfamiliar feeling. And strangely, she didn't dislike it. Across the room, Lucia glanced at the rain-speckled window, then almost imperceptibly shifted one of the curtains closed. Not for privacy. For visibility. Reducing the chance of anyone outside seeing in. Catalea noticed. Lucia noticed that Catalea had noticed. Neither woman said a word. Some things were still better left invisible. Chapter 4. Ghosts don't stay dead. It began with the lights. Not because they went out. Because they flickered. Once. Barely noticeable. Lucia looked up from the chopping board. Catalea looked up from the newspaper. Neither woman spoke. The lights steadied again. Lucia resumed slicing carrots. Exactly 3 more cuts. Then she quietly set the knife down. The carrots can wait. Catalea lowered the paper. You saw something. I heard something. I didn't hear anything. I know. Lucia crossed to the kitchen window without looking through it. Instead, she glanced at the reflection in the microwave door. Outside, rain continued to fall. A delivery van sat across the street. Engine running. No logo. No hazard lights. No delivery. Interesting. She reached for the kettle. Switched it on. The familiar hiss of heating water filled the apartment, masking quieter sounds. There. A faint metallic click. Not outside. The fire escape. Someone had opened the security gate. Very carefully. Professionally. Lucia spoke as though discussing the weather. Catalea. When I tell you to move. I know. Don't negotiate. A beat. I dislike that sentence. I expected you would. She opened a cupboard. Not for a weapon. For flour. Catalea watched, genuinely puzzled. You intend to bake them? Lucia almost smiled. I intend to see them. She scattered a fine dusting across the narrow passage leading from the kitchen to the bedroom. White against polished timber. Almost invisible. Unless someone stepped on it. Then she quietly picked up the heavy cast-iron frying pan resting beside the stove. Catalea blinked. Really? It's well balanced. You have firearms. Lucia glanced sideways. I never said that. No. You assumed. I did. The kettle clicked off. Silence returned. Then, a whisper. The unmistakable scrape of rubber against painted metal. Someone was climbing. 3 floors below, 2 men moved without speaking. Night vision. Suppressors. Military-grade climbing gear. Their briefing had been simple. Confirm the target. Recover any electronics. Leave no witnesses. The cleaner wasn't even mentioned. Inside the apartment, Lucia switched off every light. Darkness settled instantly. Catalea's pulse quickened. You've rehearsed this. No. You've done it. Yes. She crouched beside the hallway. One hand resting lightly against the floor. Feeling vibrations. Another impossible habit. The window latch shifted. 1 millimeter. Then another. Someone outside was bypassing it. No smashed glass. No noise. Professionals. Lucia leaned toward Catalea. So far. So far. They're better than average. Comforting. Remarkably uncomforting. The window slid open. A gloved hand appeared. Then another. The first intruder climbed silently inside. His boots landed. Softly. Then. Crunch. The faintest whisper of flour. Lucia smiled. There you are. The frying pan left her hand. Not swung. Thrown. It rotated once through the darkness. A dull crack echoed through the apartment. The man collapsed before he'd fully understood he'd been discovered. The second operative reacted instantly. Weapon raised. Lucia was already moving. Not fast. Efficient. She stepped inside the line of fire before the muzzle completed its arc. One hand trapped his wrist. The other struck his elbow. A sharp snap. The pistol clattered harmlessly across the floor. The man inhaled to shout. Lucia drove 2 fingers into a pressure point beneath his jaw. His legs folded beneath him. 3 seconds. Maybe 4. Silence returned. Catalea stared. The cleaner calmly picked up the discarded pistol. Removed the magazine. Cleared the chamber. Placed the weapon on the kitchen counter. Then she retrieved the frying pan. She inspected it thoughtfully. Dent. You checked the pan. It was expensive. Catalea blinked. You stole my line. It was a good line. Neither unconscious man wore identifying marks. No tattoos. No gang colors. No jewelry. Lucia searched them with practice speed. Lockpicks. Encrypted radio. Cash. Ceramic knife. She frowned. No phones. They're disciplined. They're disposable. Catalea watched every movement. Every pocket searched in exactly the same order. Every item placed into neat rows. Methodical. Clinical. Not improvised. Training. Years of it. You've done this before. Lucia didn't answer. She simply zipped the first man's jacket closed after searching it. Oddly respectful. Catalea stepped closer despite the pain in her ribs. You disarmed him before he fired. Yes. You broke his elbow. Yes. You knew exactly where to hit his jaw. Yes. You threw a frying pan with the accuracy of an Olympic athlete. Lucia looked down at the pan again. It has excellent weight distribution. Silence. Lucia. What exactly were you before you became a cleaner? Lucia considered the question seriously. Then answered. Tired. Catalea couldn't help herself. She laughed. Immediately regretted it. Lucia sighed. I was wondering how long it would take. For what? For you to laugh before your ribs remembered. A low groan interrupted them. The first intruder was waking. Lucia crossed the room. She knelt beside him. Not threatening. Almost gentle. He blinked. Saw her face. Confusion. The cleaner. Lucia smiled politely. Yes. He relaxed. Fatal mistake. In one impossibly fluid movement, she wrapped a zip tie around his wrists, rolled him onto his stomach, and secured his ankles before he'd even finished inhaling. He stared at her. What? You should have worn shoe covers. He frowned. What? She pointed toward the flower. You tracked it everywhere. Catalea watched the exchange with growing disbelief. You planned that. I dislike cleaning twice. I refuse to believe this is your normal. It wasn't. What was? Lucia looked at the unconscious second operative, then quietly began sweeping up the flower. The carrots are probably ruined. The room fell silent again. Rain continued against the windows. The apartment looked almost untouched, except for 2 unconscious professionals lying neatly side by side on the floor. Lucia covered them both with a blanket. Catalea stared. Why? They'll be cold. You incapacitated them. I didn't say I disliked them. You're the strangest woman I've ever met. Lucia picked up the broom. I've heard that. An hour later, after anonymous calls had ensured the police would discover two unidentified intruders in an apartment whose tenant had conveniently gone out for the evening, Lucia locked the door again. She returned to the kitchen, checked the soup, added a pinch of salt. As though the interruption had merely delayed dinner. Catalea leaned against the counter, arms folded carefully to protect her ribs. I have one conclusion. Lucia tasted the broth. Only one. You are either the world's most overqualified cleaner. She paused. Or the world's worst liar. Lucia blew gently across the spoon before tasting it again. It needed salt. Lucia. I'm going to find out who you really are. Lucia met her eyes over the rim of the soup pot. For the first time since they'd met, something unreadable flickered across her face. Not fear. Not panic. Regret. I know. Because after tonight, there was no putting the invisible woman completely back into the shadows. Catalea had seen too much. And ghosts never stayed dead for long. Chapter 5. The woman behind the mop. Catalea Pellegrini had built an empire on one simple belief. Everyone left a trail. Money, data, travel, habits, purchases. People believed they disappeared because no one was looking. Catalea had made billions by looking, which was precisely why Lucia irritated her. She left. Nothing. It began with a toothbrush. Most people bought whatever happened to be on sale. Lucia's toothbrush had the handle shaved down by hand. Lighter. Easier to pack. A travel habit. Military. Then the towels. Folded into identical rectangles. Hospital corners on the bed. Shoes aligned toe out toward the front door. A habit designed for speed, not tidiness. The books. Emergency medicine. Field trauma. Navigation. Psychology. Combat engineering. The apartment itself. No mirrors facing the windows. No furniture blocking exits. Every chair positioned with a view of the entrance. None of it proved anything. Together. It proved everything. Lucia entered the living room carrying fresh bandages. You've been profiling my towels. I have. They're winning. They're suspiciously symmetrical. I iron them. You iron towels? They behave better afterwards. Catalea accepted the clean bandages. I've never met anyone who irons towels. I've never met anyone who alphabetizes hostile takeovers. I don't alphabetize them. You color code them. You looked. The folders were visible. They were encrypted. They were also labeled blue. Catalea sighed. Fair. Changing the bandages had become an unspoken routine. Lucia worked quietly, competently. She warned before touching the wound. Never rushed. Never fussed. You stitch this yourself. Yes. The spacing is perfect. I've had practice. On people. A pause. Among other things. Interesting. That afternoon, Lucia announced she needed groceries. I'll be 20 minutes. 32. Lucia frowned. What? The market is 12 minutes away. You timed me. I estimated. You've been trapped in my apartment for 4 days. I've been observing. I've noticed. Their eyes met. For the briefest moment. They smiled at exactly the same time. Neither acknowledged it. The moment the apartment door clicked shut, Catalea moved. Not because she distrusted Lucia. Because she trusted patterns. She opened the cupboard beneath the sink. Cleaning products. Exactly as expected. She checked behind the cereal boxes. Nothing. Inside the wardrobe. Perfectly folded clothes. 3 pairs of jeans. For plain shirts. 1 formal black suit. Interesting. Very interesting. The suit wasn't expensive. But it had been tailored. Professionally. Not the sort of thing cleaners usually owned. She checked the labels. Gone. Every manufacturer's tag had been carefully removed. purposefully. Next, the bathroom cabinet. Painkillers, antiseptic, medical tape, sutures, prescription antibiotics, military-grade clotting gauze. Her fingers stopped. Civilian pharmacies didn't stock military clotting gauze. Someone had access. Or had. She opened the freezer. Meals prepared in identical containers. Each dated. Each portioned. One shelf contained nothing but ice packs. Another held vacuum-sealed emergency rations. She almost laughed. Who organized frozen peas by expiry date? Lucia, apparently. Then she found the toolbox. Not unusual. Until she opened it. No random collection of screwdrivers. Every tool fitted into custom-cut foam. Each space labeled. One compartment empty. Recently. The outline was unmistakable. A compact pistol. Gone. Not hidden. Carried. Catalea closed the box slowly. Definitely not a cleaner. She was still standing there when she heard the key in the lock. Lucia entered carrying 2 shopping bags. She stopped. Looked at the open toolbox. Then at Catalea. Neither woman spoke. Finally, Lucia sighed. You opened the freezer. I did. You found the toolbox. I did. You judged my organizational system. I admired it. Lucia looked genuinely relieved. Good. You aren't angry? You were always going to look. You expected this. I would've. Catalea folded her arms. Carefully. You removed every clothing label. Yes. You own military medical supplies. Yes. You carry a concealed firearm. Lucia set the groceries on the counter. Sometimes. You didn't deny it. I've stopped trying. Lucia unpacked groceries with infuriating calm. Milk. Bread. Tomatoes. Coffee. Terrible coffee. Catalea watched. You knew I'd investigate. Of course. Why didn't you stop me? Lucia picked up a jar of pasta sauce. You would have become creative. I dislike creative investigations. Catalea couldn't argue with that. She noticed something else. Lucia placed every grocery on the counter before putting anything away. Grouping them first. Planning. Then moving. Always 2 steps ahead. Even shopping had a tactical sequence. You process information in stages. Lucia looked over. Everyone does. No, they don't. Most people unpack as they go. Lucia considered that. Huh. You've never noticed? I've always done it this way. Another tiny piece of the puzzle. The most fascinating thing about Lucia wasn't that she was hiding something. It was that she didn't realize how much of herself she revealed through habits. Later that evening, rain returned. Again. Lucia stood at the window. Listening. Not looking. Listening. Catalea joined her. You hear things before I do. Usually. You saw those men before they entered. I heard them. You knew exactly where they'd step. I guessed. You don't guess. No. Silence. Then. You calculate. Lucia smiled faintly. That too. Catalea turned toward her. I've been trying to decide what bothers me most. Lucia waited. You're clearly highly trained. You stitched a gunshot wound. Yes. You defeated 2 professionals with kitchen equipment. They underestimated cookware. They underestimated you. They often do. You own emergency trauma supplies. Yes. You never panic. No. You don't drink alcohol. Lucia blinked. How do you know that? You've cooked with wine twice. And? The bottles are still full. Lucia stared. That's irritating. I've been told I'm thorough. You've been told correctly. The kettle boiled. Lucia poured hot water into 2 mugs. Coffee. Terrible coffee. She handed one to Catalea, who accepted it despite herself. It still smells awful. It builds character. I already have character. I know. You keep saying that. Because it's true. Catalea took a sip. Made exactly the same face as yesterday. Lucia tried very hard not to smile. Failed. As the rain softened outside, Cautalea realized something unexpected. She had spent 5 days investigating Lucia. Every answer had produced 3 new questions. Every habit contradicted the life she claimed to live. Every ordinary moment hinted at an extraordinary past. And yet, for all the secrets, for all the impossible skills, for all the carefully hidden truths, one fact remained stubbornly unchanged. Lucia had never once asked Cautalea for anything. Not money, not influence, not gratitude, not even an explanation. In Cautalea's world, that was rarer than loyalty. Across the room, Lucia quietly rinsed their mugs. She caught Cautalea studying her reflection in the kitchen window. Without turning around, she said softly, "You'll find my past eventually." Cautalea didn't deny it. "I know." Lucia dried the mug and placed it precisely where it belonged. "But I wonder." She paused. "If you'll like me less once you do." The words hung between them. Not dramatic. Not pleading. Simply honest. For the first time since waking in this apartment, Cautalea had no immediate reply. Because the question wasn't tactical. It wasn't about training, aliases, or hidden weapons. It was about the woman behind the mop. And somehow, that was the mystery she had become most determined to solve. Chapter 6. Nana's Shadow. The package arrived at exactly 8 a.m. 1 knock. 2 seconds. A second knock. Then silence. Lucia didn't move immediately. She buttered her toast. Poured coffee. Terrible coffee. Only then did she walk to the door. She checked the peephole. Empty hallway. She unlocked 3 locks, left the security chain in place, and opened the door just enough to see a plain brown parcel sitting neatly on the welcome mat. No courier. No note. No return address. She stared at it for a long moment, then quietly closed the door again. Cautalea looked up from the newspaper. "You aren't bringing it in." "No. You think it's a bomb." "I think it's a package. I dislike assumptions." Cautalea smiled. "I've noticed." Lucia waited another full minute before opening the door again. The parcel hadn't moved. She crouched, examined the tape, the corners, the weight. Then she lifted it. "Heavy? No. Explosives? No. You know already." "I know enough." She carried it to the kitchen table. Still unopened. Still thoughtful. Then, she frowned. Very slightly. "What?" "The string." Cautalea looked closer. Ordinary brown twine. Perfectly tied. Lucia shook her head. "No." "What?" "The knot." She leaned in. "It's Italian." Lucia blinked. "There are Italian knots?" "There are grandmothers." "That's different." "It really is." Lucia untied the parcel instead of cutting it. The paper unfolded neatly. Inside sat a single tin of almond biscotti, a small glass jar of homemade fig jam, and an envelope. Cream paper. Wax seal. Dark green. No crust. Just one pressed olive leaf. Cautalea went completely still. She knew that seal. Only one person in the world still used it. Nana. Lucia looked from the envelope to Cautalea. "You should read it." "You aren't curious?" "I am. But it wasn't addressed to me." "Interesting." Again. Most people would have looked. Most people would have peeked. Most people would have justified it. Lucia simply didn't. Cautalea broke the seal. Inside rested a single handwritten page. No greeting. No signature. Only elegant Italian script. "If you are reading this, then Matteo has done his job and my old bones have once again been proven wiser than your expensive computers." Cautalea closed her eyes briefly. "That sounded exactly like Nana." She continued. "You are undoubtedly asking yourself who betrayed you. Stop asking. You already know. The better question is who remained loyal." A pause. Then, "Have you thanked the woman making your soup?" Cautalea slowly lowered the page. Lucia was pretending to be fascinated by the biscuits. You've read this before. No. You weren't surprised. I've met your grandmother. Excuse me. Lucia looked up. I said I've heard about your grandmother. Did you? I might have. You definitely didn't. Catalea returned to the letter. You believe you built your empire alone. You didn't. You believe your walls kept danger away. They didn't. You believed you understood every security system in your company. You never even noticed the strongest one. Her heartbeat slowed. She read those lines again. Then again. The strongest security system. Lucia was quietly arranging biscuits on a plate. No. Surely not. The final paragraph was shorter. There are things I kept from you because love sometimes wears the face of deception. When you are strong enough, ask the cleaner why she never missed a single shift. Then ask yourself why. Nothing more. No signature. None needed. Catalea folded the letter carefully. Lucia poured tea. Not coffee this time. Tea. She knows you're alive. She always knows. You don't sound surprised. I'm Italian. That's your explanation? It's nah. Fair. Neither woman spoke for several minutes. The apartment filled with the quiet sound of rain tapping gently against the windows. Finally, Catalea asked, How old is this jam? Lucia blinked. What? The jar. Lucia turned it over. Handwritten label. April. This year. She still labels preserved by hand. Apparently. She refuses barcode stickers. Lucia smiled. They're ugly. Catalea looked sharply at her. You know that. Lucia realized her mistake half a heartbeat too late. I guessed. You guessed my grandmother's opinions on barcode stickers? They seem consistent. Lucia. You've met her. Silence. Lucia stirred her tea. Once. Twice. I've met many elderly Italian women. My grandmother isn't many elderly Italian women. No. She's unforgettable. Yes. Another silence. Catalea picked up one of the biscotti. The almond flavor was unmistakable. Childhood. Christmas. Safety. Before boardrooms. Before blood. Before becoming La Reina. You know, she said quietly, when I was 8, I asked Nana why she never hired bodyguards. Lucia listened. She told me. Catalea smiled despite herself. People only shoot at the men holding guns. Lucia laughed. Actually laughed. A warm, surprised sound. That sounds exactly right. It does. Did she ever explain? No. She didn't need to. Lucia nodded. No. She wouldn't have. Later that afternoon, Catalea drifted through the apartment again. Only now. She wasn't looking for clues about Lucia. She was looking for clues about Nana. The books. The apartment. The routines. The impossible competence. The soup. The towels. The discipline. The invisibility. What if? None of it had been accidental? What if someone had placed Lucia exactly where she needed to be? Years ago. Waiting. Watching. Like a queen quietly protecting another queen before the game had even begun. That evening, Lucia stood on the small balcony watering the basil. Catalea joined her carefully. Without looking away from the tiny plant, Lucia said, Your grandmother loves rosemary. I know. She says basil forgives. Catalea froze. Slowly. Very slowly. She turned toward her. My grandmother says that? Lucia's shoulders dropped almost imperceptibly. She'd done it again. Another memory. Another thread. Another piece of a conversation that should never have existed. She looked at the basil. Then sighed. Yes. No guessing this time? No. You've met her. Yes. When? Lucia was silent for so long that Catalea thought she might refuse to answer. Instead, she said quietly, A long time ago. Why? I can't tell you. You won't. I gave my word. To whom? Lucia finally looked at her. There was no evasion in her eyes. Only unwavering loyalty. You already know. Catalea did. Nana. Only Nana could inspire that kind of answer. Not fear. Not obligation. Respect. The sort that couldn't be bought. The sort that had to be earned. As dusk settled over the city, Catalea looked beyond the balcony toward the skyline. For the first time in her life, she entertained a possibility that had never once crossed her mind. Perhaps her grandmother hadn't merely built an empire. Perhaps she'd been quietly building a future, one invisible person at a time. And somewhere across the city, an elderly Italian woman was almost certainly smiling over a fresh pot of espresso, muttering to herself, "They're finally asking the right questions." Chapter 7. Hostile Takeover. Death had one unexpected advantage. Nobody expected an email from a corpse. Catalea sat at Lucia's small kitchen table, her ribs wrapped tightly beneath a fresh shirt, staring at a laptop that definitely wasn't a cleaner's. It wasn't new. It wasn't expensive. It was simply impossible. No manufacturer logo. No serial number. No webcam. No microphone. The keyboard showed almost nowhere. It was a machine built for one purpose: to leave no footprints. Catalea rested her fingers lightly on the keys. "You own interesting equipment." Lucia, busy kneading bread dough, didn't look up. "It was on sale." "I dislike shopping." "So, you accidentally bought a custom-built air-gapped laptop?" "I've made worse purchases." Catalea smiled. "I don't even want to know." Wise. The laptop hummed softly. One encrypted drive. Then another. 3 authentication prompts. A biometric scan. Finally, her own operating system bloomed to life. No corporate logo. Just a single white chess queen on a black screen. "Welcome home, LA Reina." For the first time since the warehouse, Catalea looked like herself again. Not because of the technology. Because she had a battlefield. Lucia quietly slid a mug onto the table. "Tea. Not coffee. You anticipated I'd be working. I anticipated you'd forget lunch." "I never forget lunch." "You forgot yesterday." "I was unconscious." "You were." "That hardly counts." "It still happened." Catalea accepted defeat with surprising grace. "Fair." Within minutes, encrypted dashboards unfolded across the screen. Shipping manifests. Satellite feeds. Banking networks. Corporate acquisitions. Hundreds of moving parts. Her empire wasn't collapsing. It was. Waiting. Waiting for instructions. She smiled. "They're impatient." Lucia looked over. "Who?" "My enemies." Catalea began typing. Fast. Elegant. Purposeful. She didn't hack. She redirected. One shell company quietly lost ownership of 4 warehouses. A holding account in Zurich suddenly found itself under international tax review. 2 cryptocurrency exchanges froze assets linked to known laundering networks. A shipping insurance policy was mysteriously suspended. No explosions. No gunfire. Just paperwork. Weaponized. Across the city, inside a warehouse overlooking the docks, Milan Kovac's phone chimed. He glanced down. Account temporarily restricted. He frowned. Another notification. Wire transfer failed. Another. Access denied. What? His accountant looked up from a laptop. "Boss?" "What?" "I think." The man swallowed. "I think we're bankrupt." Back in the apartment, Catalea sipped her tea. "They'll check their offshore accounts next." Lucia folded a tea towel. Then the emergency reserves. Then they'll blame each other. Lucia nodded once. As people do. Catalea glanced sideways. "You aren't curious?" "I assume they're having a bad morning." "They're having a catastrophic morning." Lucia considered that. "They probably deserved it." "I like you." The words escaped before Catalea could stop them. Silence. Lucia blinked once. "I know. That's all." You'll probably change your mind later. I rarely do. Lucia returned to folding towels. Hospital corners. Of course. The first video feed appeared. A drone circling above the docks. Catalea enlarged the image. Kovac. Shouting. Throwing a phone across the room. His lieutenants arguing amongst themselves. Perfect. Fear spread faster than bullets. All it needed was uncertainty. She opened another window. A secure corporate messaging platform. Recipients. Board of Directors. She typed exactly one sentence. Remain calm. Follow Protocol Black. Await my return. No signature. No explanation. She sent it. Lucia looked over. They'll know it's you. They'll hope. Another message. This one far more interesting. Recipient. Unknown. The encrypted address she'd discovered months ago. The one her fiancé had been using. Catalea typed slowly. Your payment has been delayed. The asset survived longer than expected. Proceed with Phase 2. She hit send. Lucia stopped wiping the counter. That's bait. Yes. You already know she's watching. I know she's impatient. And impatient people make mistakes. They always do. An hour later, the reply arrived. Exactly as predicted. Confirmed death before further transfer. No body. No payment. Catalea smiled. There you are. Lucia frowned. You expected that? I expected greed. She copied the message. Fed it through 6 separate tracing programs. One by one, the false locations disappeared. Singapore. Prague. Buenos Aires. Cape Town. Finally, one address remained. Not a country. Not a server. A private terminal. Inside Pellegrini Global Holdings. Executive level. Catalea's expression didn't change. Only her eyes cooled. My office. Lucia quietly placed another slice of bread beside her. You should eat. I've just confirmed the woman I intended to marry is selling my empire. You should definitely eat. Catalea looked at her. Then, unexpectedly, laughed. I've met hostage negotiators less practical than you. Hunger complicates decision-making. I suppose betrayal does too. It usually comes after lunch. By late afternoon, the underworld was in chaos. Rumors multiplied. Some claimed the Russians had seized Pellegrini assets. Others insisted the Americans had frozen accounts. A few whispered that Reina had planned everything before she died. No one considered the simplest explanation. That she was sitting in a modest apartment eating homemade bread while dismantling their financial infrastructure one transfer at a time. Lucia stood beside the window, watching the street. Always watching. You know, Catalea said quietly. You never ask how I do any of this. Lucia shrugged. I don't need to. Why not? Because it works. You trust me. Yes. The answer came so naturally. So immediately. That Catalea almost missed it. You've known me less than a week. I've watched you longer than that. Silence. Catalea looked up sharply. Lucia had already turned back toward the window. Too late. Another thread had escaped. Another impossible sentence. I meant. Lucia began. No. Catalea stood carefully, ignoring the protest from her ribs. You didn't. Lucia closed her eyes for the briefest moment. Careless. Again. You said you've watched me. I did. How long? No answer. Lucia. Still nothing. The room seemed suddenly smaller. The silence heavier. Finally, Lucia spoke without turning around. Long enough to know you skip breakfast before difficult meetings. Catalea's heartbeat slowed. You noticed that? Yes. You noticed enough to predict I'd forget lunch today. Yes. You've watched me. Yes. How? Lucia looked out at the rain-washed city. At Pellegrini Tower standing proudly against the skyline. At a promise she'd made 2 years earlier to an unforgettable old woman. Some promises protected lives. Others protected hearts. I can't answer that. Catalea studied her in silence. Then she looked back at the laptop, at the collapsing bank accounts, at the empire quietly returning to her control, at the woman standing guard by the window who knew she skipped breakfast before difficult meetings. No algorithm could have known that. No satellite. No surveillance software. Only someone who had been there. Watching. Invisible. For far longer than Catalea had ever imagined. Outside, phones across the criminal underworld continued chiming with disastrous notifications. Hostile takeovers were usually loud affairs. Catalea preferred hers silent. Silent enough that the only person who truly unsettled her wasn't losing millions. She was standing 3 meters away, wondering if she'd finally said too much. Chapter 8. Terms and Conditions. Catalea Pellegrini trusted contracts. Contracts had terms, boundaries, consequences. People were far more complicated. That was the problem. For the past week, she had been studying Lucia like a puzzle with missing pieces. The training, the discipline, the impossible instincts, the mysterious connection to Nana. Every answer led to another locked door. And yet the strangest thing about Lucia was not what she hid. It was what she gave freely. Soup, bandages, silence, trust. Things Catalea had spent her entire life acquiring through leverage. Lucia simply offered them. It was deeply inconvenient. "You're staring at the coffee again." Catalea looked down. The mug sat untouched beside her laptop. "I am considering whether it qualifies as a beverage." Lucia continued slicing vegetables. "It does. That is generous. It contains water. That is a very low standard. You have very high standards. I have standards. You once rejected a restaurant because the waiter placed the fork incorrectly. The fork was wrong." Lucia looked up. The fork. Yes. Not the food. The fork affected the experience. A pause. Then, "You are exhausting." Catalea smiled. "People usually say fascinating. People usually want something from you." That quieted the room. Because it was true. Lucia placed the knife down. Not dramatically. Not intentionally. Simply because she had finished. "You don't know how to receive kindness." Catalea raised an eyebrow. "That's an accusation." "No." "What is it?" "An observation. You make many of those." "Yes. And they are usually accurate." "Usually." Catalea studied her. "Who taught you that?" Lucia looked toward the window. The military. There it was. A crack. Small. But real. Catalea did not move. Did not interrupt. Did not push. She knew the difference between opening a door and forcing it. "I joined when I was 19, Lucia said. The words sounded unfamiliar in the apartment. Personal. I was good at following instructions. Catalea almost smiled. That surprises me. It shouldn't. You don't seem like someone who follows. Lucia looked amused. I followed very carefully. Meaning I learned exactly what was expected. Then I became better than expected. That sounded more like her. Why the military? Lucia was quiet for a moment. Because I wanted purpose. Not money. Not power. Purpose. Catalea understood that more than she wanted to admit. I built Pellegrini Global because I wanted control. Lucia looked at her. Catalea continued. Not wealth. That was a consequence. She looked down at her hands. When I was young, everyone around me lied. Because of the family? Because of everything. A pause. People either feared the Pellegrini name or wanted something from it. Lucia nodded slowly. So, you created a world where nobody could surprise you. Catalea looked up. Exactly. And did it work? Catalea almost laughed. No. Why? Because people are not systems. Lucia smiled faintly. That must annoy you. Constantly. The rain began again. Soft. Steady. The kind of rain that made the city look distant. Lucia poured 2 cups of tea. She handed one over. Catalea accepted. This time, she didn't complain. Lucia noticed. Of course she did. You didn't insult it. I am capable of growth. Should I document this? I will deny it. I assumed. For several minutes, they sat without speaking. Not uncomfortable. Not awkward. Just quiet. A strange kind of luxury. Finally, Catalea asked, "What happened to your shoulder?" Lucia's hand paused around the cup. There. A boundary. A locked door. I was injured. That much I guessed. Lucia looked at her. You ask questions like you expect answers. I usually get them. How? Persistence. That sounds exhausting. It is effective. A tiny smile appeared, then disappeared. I was injured during a mission. Catalea waited. Extraction. Successful. Yes, but... Lucia looked at the scar hidden beneath her sleeve. But I didn't come home the same. The answer carried more weight than the words. Catalea understood. Because she hadn't come home the same either. You know what I find strange? Lucia looked over. What? Everyone assumes power means never being hurt. Lucia said nothing. But the most powerful people I know are simply the ones who learned how to function while carrying damage. The room went still. Lucia looked away first. Because that sentence had landed somewhere it wasn't supposed to. That night, Catalea woke from a dream she refused to remember. For several seconds, she didn't know where she was. Then she smelled rosemary. Heard the quiet movement of someone in the kitchen. She walked out. Lucia was sitting at the table, cleaning a small cut on her hand. Not serious. Just careless. You missed. Lucia looked up. What? The cut. I noticed. Then why are you still touching it? Lucia looked mildly confused. I was cleaning it. You were ignoring it. That is not the same. It is. A pause. Then Lucia smiled. Barely. But enough. You worry. Catalea immediately looked offended. I assess risks. Of course. I do. Naturally. I am not worried. Lucia nodded. You're very convincing. Catalea narrowed her eyes. I dislike you. You've said that before. I mean it every time. I know. Neither woman mentioned that Lucia left the first aid kit on the table afterwards. Or that Catalea replaced the missing bandages the next morning. Neither mentioned that Lucia stopped drinking coffee alone. Or that Catalea stopped working through every meal. No agreements. No negotiations. No contracts. Just small changes. Small choices. Small acts of trust. The kind that never appeared in board meetings. The kind that could not be measured. The kind that had no terms and conditions. And perhaps that was exactly why they mattered. Chapter 9. The Ghost Named Zale. Catalea Pellegrini had uncovered government secrets. She had exposed corporate fraud hidden beneath 6 layers of shell companies. She had traced money through accounts designed by people who believed themselves untouchable. But Lucia remained the first mystery she had failed to solve. Until that morning. Until Nana's name appeared on the screen. The message arrived at 6:03 a.m. Not through email. Not through any corporate system. Through a private channel Catalea had not used since she was 25. A channel only 3 people in the world knew existed. Her, Nana, and Matteo. The message contained one sentence. Stop investigating the woman who saved your life. Ask her what she sacrificed to do it. Catalea stared at the screen, then slowly looked across the apartment. Lucia stood at the kitchen counter making breakfast. Eggs. Toast. Coffee. Terrible coffee. Completely unaware that her entire carefully constructed identity had just become the center of Catalea's attention. Or perhaps, not unaware. Catalea had learned one thing about Lucia. Very little escaped her. Lucia. The knife stopped. Only for a moment. But Catalea saw it. Yes. Who are you? A lesser person might have denied everything. A lesser person might have panicked. Lucia simply placed the knife down. Carefully. I wondered how long it would take. Catalea stood. Pain protested from her ribs. She ignored it. That's not an answer. No. Then give me one. Lucia looked at the kitchen table. At the 2 mugs. At the ordinary life she had built. Then she removed the apron she wore over her clothes. Folded it. Placed it on the counter. A cleaner's uniform. The disguise she had worn every day. For 2 years. It was never a lie. Catalea frowned. What? Lucia existed. Explain. She was the person I needed to become. And who were you before? Silence. Then. I was Captain Zale Mercer. The room changed. Not physically. Nothing moved. Nothing shattered. But something invisible shifted. Because Catalea knew that name. Everyone in certain circles knew that name. A ghost story. An operative who disappeared from records. A soldier whose missions were never officially acknowledged. A woman credited with surviving situations nobody survived. Catalea stared. No. Zale gave a small, humorless smile. That's usually the response. You're dead. So I've heard. Your military records were accurate. And inaccurate. Yes. Catalea took a slow breath. Why? Zale looked toward the window. Because I was injured. 2 years earlier. A military hospital room. A woman who had spent her life running toward danger sat staring at paperwork declaring her future was over. Captain Zale Mercer. Medical discharge. Permanent restrictions. Career ended. A liability. That was when the old Italian woman walked into her room. No appointment. No hesitation. No fear. Raffaella Nona Pellegrini. Zale had known immediately who she was. Everyone in certain worlds knew. But the elderly woman did not arrive with threats. She arrived with a folder. Inside was Catalea. Every article. Every photograph. Every threat assessment. Every moment where the brilliant young woman had survived by relying only on herself. Your granddaughter needs protection, Zale had said. Nana corrected her. My granddaughter needs someone who knows when she is lying. Zale had looked confused. Everyone lies. Yes. Nana leaned forward. But my granddaughter lies to herself most of all. The offer was simple. Recovery. Resources. A new identity. One condition. Catalea could never know. She would reject you, Nana had said. Because she doesn't trust anyone? Because she trusts herself. And if I fail? Nana had smiled sadly. Then you fail protecting the person who has spent her whole life protecting everyone else. Back in the apartment, Catalea absorbed every word. You watched me for 2 years. Zale nodded. Yes. You cleaned my office. Yes. You emptied my trash. Yes. You heard every private conversation. No. Catalea looked surprised. No. I avoided anything that wasn't necessary. Why? Because protecting someone does not mean stealing their privacy. That answer hurt more than Catalea expected. Because she believed it. You knew about the threats. Yes. You knew about the betrayal. Not at first. When? When she started changing. Catalea went still. The engagement. Zale nodded. I noticed things that didn't fit. Such as. She stopped looking at you when you spoke. The answer was quiet. Simple. Human. She looked at your money. Your position. Your name. A pause. Not you. Catalea looked away. Because that was the part that hurt. Not the betrayal. The confirmation. You should have told me. Maybe. Maybe? Zale met her eyes. Would you have listened? Catalea opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Because the answer was obvious. No. No. The honesty was almost refreshing. Almost irritating. For a long moment, they simply stood there. Kautilea looking at the woman who had been invisible beside her for 2 years. Zale looking at the woman she had protected without ever expecting to be known. Finally, Kautilea whispered, "Why did you stay?" Zale's expression changed. Just slightly. The soldier disappeared. The cleaner disappeared. Only the woman remained. Because Nana asked me to. Kautilea waited. That wasn't enough. Zale knew it. So did she. Then she added softly. And, because after a while. She looked down. I wanted to. The answer was quiet. Almost nothing. But it was everything. That evening, the cleaning cart remained by the door. Untouched. And used. For the first time in 2 years, Zale Mercer did not need to disappear. And for the first time in her life, Kautilea Pellegrini had to face something far more dangerous than betrayal. Someone had seen every sharp edge, every flaw, every weakness, every carefully hidden piece. And instead of walking away, she stayed. Chapter 10. The board, not the piece. Kautilea Pellegrini was not angry often. Anger required losing control. She preferred precision. Cold decisions. Measured responses. A person who shouted revealed too much. A person who stayed quiet revealed everything. Which was why Zale knew she was in trouble. The apartment had been silent for almost an hour. Not peaceful. Silent. There was a difference. Zale stood by the window, watching rain slide down the glass. Kautilea sat at the kitchen table, staring at the untouched cup of tea in front of her. Not coffee. Not today. Neither woman had mentioned the fact that Kautilea had not insulted it. Neither woman had mentioned that the absence of a joke felt heavier than one. Finally, Kautilea spoke. She planned everything. Zale did not pretend not to understand. Yes, my grandmother. Yes, 2 years. Yes, Kautilea nodded slowly. 2 years. The words sounded worse the second time. She stood. Slowly. Carefully. The injury was healing. The betrayal was not. She placed you there. Yes. Without telling me. Yes. She decided I needed a bodyguard. No. Kautilea stopped. No. Zale turned from the window. She decided you needed someone who would see you. That answer should not have made things worse. It did. Because it sounded exactly like Nana. My entire life, Kautilea said quietly, people have made decisions about me. Zale listened. They see the name. The money. The company. Her jaw tightened. They decide what I need. A pause. And now my own grandmother. Cat. No. The word was sharp. Not cruel. Painful. Do not defend her yet. Zale stopped. Because she understood. Kautilea needed the anger. Needed to hold it. If she let it go too quickly, she would have to admit what came after. I trusted her. I know. I trusted her more than anyone. I know. And she lied. Zale looked down. Yes. The agreement hurt more than denial would have. Kautilea turned away. Everyone always says they lied because they were protecting me. A bitter laugh escaped. Apparently, that is the most popular excuse in my life. The truth was, Kautilea understood manipulation. She had built an empire by recognizing it. She knew when someone moved a piece on the board. She knew when someone tried to control the game. What she hated, what she could not forgive, was that Nana had played a game she was never allowed to see. Why you? The question came quietly. Zale answered just as quietly. Because I was the only person Nana believed you couldn't intimidate. Kautilea looked offended. I don't intimidate people. Zale raised an eyebrow. A small one. Barely there. Kautilea stared. Then sighed. Fine. A pause. People are sometimes intimidated. Sometimes. You're enjoying this. No. You are. Maybe. And there it was. The smallest crack. The first hint that Zale was no longer just standing guard. She was teasing. Carefully. testing the boundaries of a life where she didn't have to remain invisible. Catalea sat again. Tell me everything. Zale hesitated. Everything. Everything. That's a dangerous request. I am aware. Zale considered her, then nodded. Nana found me after my injury. The hospital. Yes. She came herself? Yes. Catalea almost smiled. Of course she did. She walked into a military hospital with 2 bodyguards and told the nurses she was visiting family. Did anyone question her? Zale looked amused. No. Why? Because she looked like someone's grandmother. Catalea laughed once. A genuine laugh. That was her greatest weapon. Yes. She told me you were brilliant. Catalea looked away. She also told me I was impossible. She said that too. Naturally. Zale continued. She said technology would protect your company. Security systems would protect your buildings. A pause. But nobody would protect you. Catalea looked back. Why? Because everyone wanted something from you. The answer landed quietly. But you didn't. No. Why? Zale looked almost surprised. Because that wasn't the job. The job was protection. Yes. And after 2 years? Zale was silent. The pause mattered. Then, the job changed. Catalea noticed. Not the words. The hesitation. The tiny pause before answering. The same way she noticed everything. What changed? Zale looked toward the kitchen. At the soup pot. The table. The ordinary life neither of them had expected. You did. Catalea said nothing. You stopped being an assignment. Another pause. You became someone I cared about. For once. Catalea had no strategic response. No clever remark. No negotiation. No counterargument. Just silence. Because she understood something. Nana had not placed Zale beside her like a chess piece. She had placed her there because she knew Catalea would never choose someone herself. Catalea chose alliances, partnerships, contracts, transactions. But she avoided needing people. Nana had not removed Catalea's choice. She had given her a chance to discover one. She knew I would reject you. Yes. She knew I would see you as a weakness. Yes. And she still did it. Yes. Catalea shook her head. My grandmother is impossible. Zale nodded. Yes. A small smile appeared. But she was right. Catalea looked at her. That was dangerous territory. Careful. About what? Agreeing with Nana. Why? Because she will somehow know. Zale looked toward the ceiling. She probably already does. Catalea sighed. Of course she does. That evening, Catalea walked past the cleaning cart by the door. The one that had belonged to Lucia. The disguise. The invisible identity. She stopped. For 2 years, she had believed the cleaner was hiding from the world. Now she understood. Lucia had not been hiding. She had been waiting. Waiting for the moment when Catalea finally saw her. Not the uniform. Not the role. Not the usefulness. The woman. Zale found Catalea standing in front of the cart. You don't have to do that anymore. Zale looked at it. I know. Then why keep it? A long pause. Because Lucia saved you. Catalea looked at her. Not Zale. Not Captain Mercer. Lucia. The woman who made soup. The woman who complained about coffee. The woman who had protected her without demanding to be thanked. Yes. And I don't want to forget her. Zale nodded. Neither do I. For years, Catalea had believed the most dangerous position on a chessboard was the queen. She was wrong. The most dangerous position was the person who understood the entire board. Nana had not given her a piece to move. She had given her someone who could see the game. Someone who could see her. And that was the one thing Catalea Pellegrini had never known how to defend against. Being truly seen. Chapter 11. Bad Investments. The world learned La Reina was alive at 9 a.m. Not through a press conference. Not through a dramatic return. Not through a photograph of Caudalia Pellegrini stepping out of a black vehicle surrounded by security. That would have been expected. Caudalia Pellegrini had never been interested in expected. The first sign came from the markets. Pellegrini Global Holdings stock stopped falling. Then it climbed. Then it surged. Investors who had spent days panicking suddenly received a single encrypted message. The chair remains occupied. No signature. No explanation. No photograph. But everyone understood. The Queen had returned to the board. Her fiancé saw the message while sitting in the penthouse apartment Caudalia had bought for them. The same apartment where she had hosted charity dinners. The same apartment where she had smiled beside Caudalia for photographers. The same apartment where she had betrayed her. She stared at the screen. Impossible. Caudalia was dead. She had watched the reports. She had watched the rival syndicate celebrate. She had watched the world move on. That was the problem with people like Caudalia Pellegrini. They never moved on. They moved quietly. At Pellegrini Global Holdings, an emergency board meeting began. The directors sat around the long glass table. Nervous. Confused. Afraid. Then the doors opened. Caudalia walked in. No dramatic entrance. No announcement. No entourage. Just a woman in a white suit carrying a tablet. The room went silent. One director actually stood. Miss Pellegrini. Caudalia placed the tablet on the table. Good morning. No one spoke. Finally, the CFO found his voice. We believed that I was dead. A pause. Yes, I noticed. The room relaxed slightly. Not because she was alive. Because she was herself. Calm. Controlled. Terrifying. I have reviewed the security failures. Everyone stiffened. And I have reviewed the internal breach. Silence. The attack was not successful because our systems failed. She looked around the table. Our systems worked. She tapped the tablet. The failure occurred because someone inside the organization provided access. The screen displayed encrypted transfers. Dates. Times. Accounts. Names. The room changed. Because everyone understood. This wasn't an accusation. It was evidence. The final image appeared. Her fiancé. Accessing confidential files. Using credentials that should never have been available outside executive security. The room went completely silent. One director whispered. No. Caudalia looked at him. Yes. How long? 7 months. The answer stunned them. 7 months. She was careful. A pause. Almost. Later that afternoon, the world watched. Not because Caudalia held a press conference. Because her legal team released a statement. Simple. Clinical. Devastating. No accusations. No emotional language. No revenge. Only facts. The engagement had ended. Financial arrangements had been terminated. Access rights had been revoked. Corporate assets connected to the breach had been recovered. The investigation had been transferred to authorities. The public expected anger. They received paperwork. And somehow, that was worse. You didn't destroy her. Zale stood beside Caudalia in the executive office. The same office where this had all begun. Caudalia looked out over the city. No. Why? Because destruction is emotional. She turned. Correction is permanent. Zale considered that. You could have ruined her. I could have. You chose not to. No. Caudalia returned to the window. I chose not to confuse justice with revenge. A small smile touched Zale's face. Nana would approve. Do not tell her. She'll know. Obviously. The hardest part came later. Not the betrayal. Not the public humiliation. Not the loss of someone she thought she understood. The hardest part was the memory. The moment her fiancé had once asked, "Do you love me?" And Caudalia had answered honestly, "I trust you." At the time, she thought they were the same thing. They weren't. Zale found her standing alone in the office after everyone had left. No laptop. No phone. No work. Just silence. You knew. Zale stepped inside. Knew what? That she wasn't the person I thought she was. Zale didn't answer immediately. I suspected. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't have proof. Catalea nodded. That was the correct answer. I know. You could have saved me pain. Maybe. But you respected my choice. Yes. Catalea looked at her. There it was again. The difference. Everyone else had tried to protect her by taking decisions away. Zale protected her by giving her space to make them. That night, Catalea returned home. Not to the penthouse. Not to the empty luxury apartment. To Lucia's apartment. The place with mismatched furniture. The terrible coffee. The soup. The woman who never asked for anything. Zale was sitting on the sofa reading. You came back. Catalea removed her coat. I live here temporarily. Of course. I am recovering. Of course. I am not staying because. She stopped. Because suddenly she hated how much she sounded like someone defending herself. Zale waited. Catalea sighed. I am staying because this is where I can breathe. The words surprised them both. Zale closed the book. That's a good reason. For the first time in weeks, Catalea slept without checking security feeds, without reviewing threats, without planning her next move. The war wasn't over. There were still enemies, still consequences, still unfinished business. But the woman who woke from her sleep had changed, because Reina had returned. But she had not returned alone. And everyone who had mistaken kindness for weakness was about to learn something important. A queen could choose mercy. A queen could choose patience. A queen could choose peace. But a queen who had been betrayed still knew exactly where to place the final move. Chapter 12. War in a tailored suit. The underworld had a problem. Nobody knew what to do with a ghost. Dead people were simple. They could be mourned. They could be replaced. They could be forgotten. But Catalea Pellegrini had done something deeply inconvenient. She had died, and continued making decisions. For 3 weeks, rumors had spread. Some said she survived. Some said it was a copycat. Some said the entire assassination had been planned by Pellegrini herself. The last theory was the one that made people nervous. Because everyone knew Catalea. Everyone knew Reina. She did not lose. She adjusted. Milan Kovac discovered the truth at midnight. He was sitting in the private dining room of his favorite restaurant. The same restaurant where he had celebrated Catalea's death. The irony was almost impressive. Almost. His remaining lieutenant entered hurriedly. Boss. Kovac didn't look up. What now? The man swallowed. You need to see this. A tablet was placed on the table. A video. No timestamp. No location. Just a woman walking through a corporate lobby. White suit. Black heels. Hair perfectly arranged. Calm expression. Catalea Pellegrini. Alive. Kovac stopped breathing. Not just because she was alive. Because of what was behind her. The woman carrying no weapon. The woman walking slightly behind. The woman nobody had ever noticed. Zale Mercer. Kovac looked up slowly. Who is that? Nobody answered. Because nobody knew. And that was the frightening part. The meeting was announced 24 hours later. Every major player received the invitation. No location. No negotiation terms. Only a time. And one sentence. Reina requests your presence. Nobody declined. The warehouse was different now. Cleaner. Brighter. Prepared. The same place where Catalea Pellegrini had fallen. The same floor where everyone had watched her die. Except this time. She arrived standing. The doors opened. No guards. No dramatic music. No weapons displayed. Just Catalea. A woman in a perfectly fitted charcoal suit. The kind that made people remember she owned half the city before she ever entered a room. Behind her walked Zale. No disguise. No scrubs. No cleaning cart. No invisibility. Just Captain Zale Mercer. The room changed immediately. People recognized her. Not everyone, but enough. Enough to understand. They hadn't just failed to kill Reina. They had failed to understand who was protecting her. Kovac smiled nervously. Impossible. Catalea glanced around. That word has become very popular recently. You died. Yes. You were dead. Also, yes. How? She adjusted her cuff. You should know better than to ask a businesswoman about her recovery strategy. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Even now. She joked. That was somehow worse. Kovac stepped forward. You came here alone? Catalea looked around. Did you expect an army? Something like that. She smiled faintly. No. A pause. I prefer efficiency. The screens around the warehouse activated. Everyone looked upward. Financial records. Property ownership transfers. Bank statements. Communication logs. Everything. Every betrayal. Every payment. Every secret agreement. Catalea had collected them all. I spent the last 3 weeks reviewing your operations. She walked slowly through the room. Your money laundering. Another screen. Your political arrangements. Another. Your attempted acquisition of my company. Another. And your unfortunate decision to trust someone who is lying to you. Kovac's expression changed. What? Catalea looked at him. You thought my fiancé sold you information. Silence. She did. A pause. But she didn't understand the information she was selling. Catalea stopped. She sold you pieces of a puzzle. She smiled. I gave her pieces that led you directly into a trap. The room erupted. Arguments. Accusations. Panic. Catalea waited. Patiently. Because panic was always more revealing than interrogation. Within 30 seconds, everyone had shown exactly where their loyalty was. Zale stood near the doorway. Watching. Not interfering. Because this was Catalea's battlefield. Eventually, the room became quiet. Catalea looked at them. I am not here for revenge. That surprised them. I am here because you made a business decision. She walked toward Kovac. You invested in betrayal. A pause. You invested in a weak partner. Another. You invested in the belief that my absence created an opportunity. She tilted her head. That was your mistake. Kovac stared. What do you want? Catalea considered. Accountability. A laugh escaped him. You think you're a judge now? No. She looked toward Zale. I think consequences are simply delayed invoices. Zale's mouth twitched. She heard that. Catalea noticed. Later. She would tease her about it. The police arrived 12 minutes later. Exactly as scheduled. Because Catalea Pellegrini never entered a room without knowing how she would leave it. Evidence. Witnesses. Financial records. Everything prepared. The rival syndicate leaders were arrested before midnight. No gunfire. No war. No chaos. Just paperwork. Beautiful, devastating paperwork. Outside the warehouse, rain began falling. Again. Catalea stood beneath the entrance canopy. Zale joined her. You enjoyed that. No. Your face suggests otherwise. My face is neutral. It is not. Catalea looked at her. Are you challenging my ability to control my expressions? Yes. That is dangerous. So I've heard. A pause. Then. Catalea smiled. Actually smiled. You've become very comfortable questioning me. Someone should. Most people value their survival. I value accuracy. Annoying. Frequently. They walked toward the waiting car. Not behind. Not ahead. Together. For years, Catalea had stood alone because she believed everyone beside her was either a liability or a transaction. Now she understood something. Power did not always come from standing above everyone. Sometimes, it came from having one person beside you who would tell you when you were wrong. The world had buried Reina. They had celebrated. They had divided her empire. They had counted her out. But they had forgotten one thing. Queens do not disappear because people stop looking. They disappear because they are preparing their next move. And this queen had returned wearing a tailored suit and carrying no weapon at all. Because everyone in that warehouse had learned the same lesson. The most dangerous thing about Caudalia Pellegrini was never what she could destroy. It was how calmly she decided what deserved to survive. Chapter 13. The last board meeting. The mistake people made about desperate people was assuming they became reckless. They didn't. Not always. Sometimes desperate people became patient. Sometimes they became quiet. Sometimes they waited until everyone believed the danger had passed. Then they struck. Caudalia knew something was wrong before the alert appeared. She was sitting in her office at Pellegrini Global Holdings. Her office. The one everyone thought she would never return to. The skyline stretched behind her. The city looked peaceful. Too peaceful. Zale stood near the window. Not watching the streets. Watching Caudalia. You feel it. Caudalia looked up. What? The room changed. A small smile touched Caudalia's lips. You have been spending too much time around me. No. Then. I've been spending enough time around you. That answer stayed with her. Enough time. Enough to know. The alert appeared on her screen. Not a security breach. Not a cyber attack. A meeting request. From the board. Caudalia frowned. The board meeting is tomorrow. I know. Then why are they requesting one now? Zale moved closer. Because they don't want tomorrow. Caudalia looked at her. Explain. They want urgency. A pause. Urgency creates mistakes. Caudalia nodded. Exactly. Within 10 minutes, the truth surfaced. The remaining rival families had united. Not because they trusted each other. Because they feared her. They had lost money, territory, influence. And now they had reached the final option. Remove the queen. Permanently. The plan was simple. Create a leadership crisis. Force a board vote. Trigger a corporate takeover. Destroy Caudalia's control from inside. Old strategy. Effective strategy. Against anyone else. The boardroom filled at 7 p.m. Executives. Legal advisors. Shareholders. Everyone nervous. Everyone pretending not to be. Caudalia entered first. Zale beside her. The room noticed. They always noticed. A month ago, Zale would have been ignored. Now, people moved out of her way. Visibility changed everything. One of the directors cleared his throat. Ms. Pellegrini, given recent events, we believe it is necessary to discuss temporary leadership arrangements. Caudalia sat. Temporary. Until stability returns. She looked around. Interesting. What? The people who created instability are now concerned about it. Silence. A few people shifted uncomfortably. The screens activated. Not by Caudalia. Everyone froze. A document appeared. A transfer agreement. Then another. Then another. The rival families had been moving assets through shell companies for months. Except, they had used accounts Caudalia had quietly monitored. They had walked into their own trap. Again. A man at the end of the table stood. You can't prove this. Caudalia looked at him. I already did. No. He smiled. You have evidence. A pause. But evidence can disappear. The lights went out. For 3 seconds. Nothing happened. Then emergency systems activated. Red lights. Locked doors. Security shutters. The room became a controlled environment. Not by Caudalia. Someone else. Zale moved immediately. No hesitation. No panic. She stepped between Caudalia and the room. Old instincts. Old training. Caudalia noticed. And hated it. Not because Zale was protecting her. Because Zale still believed she had to do it alone. Zale. No. That wasn't a request. It sounded like one. Catalea almost smiled. Even now, a figure appeared on the security screen. The rival family's final representative. A man who had spent years believing fear was the same as power. Your empire is finished, Catalea. She looked at the screen. That speech sounded better in your head, didn't it? His expression tightened. You think this is a game? No. She glanced at Zale. I think you do. The attack began. Not with bullets. With chaos. False alarms. System failures. Locked exits. The old-school families had finally learned from Catalea. Use technology. The problem? They had learned from the student. Not the teacher. Zale moved through the room. Fast. Precise. Not violent. Necessary. She guided executives away from danger. Disabled security overrides. Identified threats before they became threats. Catalea watched her. Not as a weapon. Not as an asset. As a partner. Catalea. Zale's voice changed. The tone. The warning. There is someone in the server room. Catalea looked at the data. Not someone. She typed. 3. Zale looked over. Can you handle the system? Catalea raised an eyebrow. Can you handle 3 people? A pause. Yes. Good. They moved. Together. No discussion. No hesitation. Like they had been doing it for years. The server room was colder than the rest of the building. Machines hummed. Lights blinked. The heart of Pellegrini Global. 3 intruders stood near the main control system. They turned. Then stopped. Because they recognized Catalea. And the woman beside her. One whispered. Mercer. Zale's expression remained calm. That's usually when people make poor decisions. The confrontation ended quickly. Because unlike her enemies, Catalea and Zale had prepared. They knew each other's strengths. They trusted each other's judgment. They didn't need instructions. They didn't need permission. They simply moved. When it was over, Catalea stood in the server room, looking at the glowing machines. My entire life, I thought trusting someone meant giving them a weapon. Zale looked at her. And now? Catalea looked around. At the company. At the empire. At the woman beside her. Now I think it means giving them the truth. Zale was quiet. Because for Catalea Pellegrini, that was not a small confession. The next morning, the board meeting continued. The same room. The same people. A completely different atmosphere. Catalea stood at the head of the table. No temporary leadership. No one argued. No emergency restructuring. Silence. No replacement. She looked around. I built this company. A pause. But I no longer believe that means I have to carry it alone. Outside the building, the city watched. Rumors spread. The queen had survived. The rivals had failed. The empire remained. But the most interesting rumor was the one nobody could explain. The woman who had always stood alone now had someone beside her. Not a bodyguard. Not a servant. Not an employee. A partner. That evening, Zale found Catalea standing near the office window. The city lights reflected in the glass. You know, Zale said, for someone who hates surprises, you create a lot of them. Catalea looked over. That is different. How? I control mine. Zale smiled. Of course. A pause. Then Catalea added quietly. But I suppose. She looked back at the city. Some surprises are worth allowing. And for the first time since she became La Reina, Catalea Pellegrini did not look like someone preparing for the next war. She looked like someone wondering what came after winning. Chapter 14. No more ghosts. Peace was louder than war. Catalea Pellegrini discovered this 3 days after the final attack. War had rules. Threats. Patterns. Enemies who announced themselves. Peace had nothing. No alarms. No encrypted messages. No urgent calls at midnight. No reason to check every reflection in every window. It was deeply uncomfortable. She woke at 3:17 a.m. Immediately alert. Immediately calculating. Exit. Threats. Distance. Escape routes. Her hand moved toward the weapon she kept beside the bed. Then she stopped. Because there was no weapon. There was no threat. There was only rain. And the sound of someone breathing softly beside her. Not beside her in the same bed. Not yet. Zale slept in the chair near the window. Still guarding. Still watching. Still pretending she wasn't. Catalea stared. 2 years of hiding. 2 years of protecting. 2 years of believing the job ended only when danger disappeared. The problem was, danger had disappeared. Zale hadn't. You know, Catalea said quietly. Zale's eyes opened instantly. Of course they did. You are terrible at pretending to sleep. Zale sat up. You are terrible at pretending you weren't awake. Fair. A pause. Then. You should use the bed. No. Why? Because you're recovering. I'm fine. You were shot. I survived. You almost died. Catalea looked at her. A rare silence. Because Zale rarely said things emotionally. When she did, they mattered. I don't know what to do now. The admission surprised them both. Catalea Pellegrini. La Reina. The woman who controlled companies, syndicates, and entire networks. Admitting uncertainty. Zale didn't smile. Didn't tease. Didn't make it smaller. She simply answered. Neither do I. That was somehow comforting. Because Catalea had spent her whole life surrounded by people pretending to know everything. Zale was the first person brave enough to say, I don't know either. The next morning, Catalea attempted normal life. It lasted 11 minutes. She stood in the kitchen holding a coffee mug. Not drinking it. Studying it. Zale walked in. You're analyzing coffee. No. You are. I am evaluating. Coffee. Yes. Again? Consistency matters. Zale opened the cupboard. The coffee is terrible. Catalea looked offended. Excuse me. You know it is. I do not. You make the same face every morning. What face? This one. Zale copied her expression. Catalea stared. Then laughed. Not politely. Not strategically. A real laugh. The kind that surprised her. The kind Zale had been waiting 2 years to hear. Later that afternoon, Catalea returned to Pellegrini Tower. Not for work. Not for a crisis. Just to walk through the building. The employees watched her. Some smiled. Some looked nervous. Most looked relieved. The queen had returned. But something about her was different. She stopped. She listened. She asked questions. She thanked people. The old Catalea would have considered that inefficient. The new Catalea understood something. People were not systems. But systems were nothing without people. She found Zale on the rooftop. Looking over the city. Not protecting. Just looking. That was new. You are not checking exits. No. Why? Zale considered the question. I don't know. Catalea stepped beside her. That is becoming a habit. What? Not knowing. Zale looked amused. I'll try to be more mysterious. You are already extremely inconvenient. I know. The city stretched below them. 1,000 lights. 1,000 stories. 1,000 people surviving their own battles. You ever regret it? Zale asked. What? Leaving the military. Catalea looked at her. Do you? No. The answer came immediately. Too immediately. Then Zale corrected herself. I miss parts of it. The purpose. Yes. The team. Yes. The certainty. Zale nodded. War tells you exactly who you are. Catalea understood. Because power did the same. And peace? Zale looked at the city. Peace asks. Ask what? Who are you when nobody needs you to fight? The question stayed. Because it wasn't just Zale's question. It was hers. Who was Caudalia Pellegrini when she wasn't La Reina? Who was the woman beneath the reputation? The woman beneath the name? That evening, Caudalia opened a drawer. Inside was Lucia's old cleaner badge. She had kept it. Not because she needed a reminder of the disguise. Because she needed a reminder of the truth. The woman who saved her life hadn't been the soldier. Not entirely. It had been the woman who made soup. The woman who folded towels. The woman who remembered breakfast. The woman who stayed. Zale found her holding it. You kept it? Yes. Why? Caudalia looked at the badge. Because everyone else saw a cleaner. A pause. I want to remember that I was saved by someone everyone overlooked. Zale was quiet. Then, that sounds like something Nana would say. Caudalia smiled. She will be unbearable when she hears. She already knows. Of course she does. Later that night, there was no attack. No emergency. No betrayal. No enemy waiting. Just dinner. A simple meal. Made together. Bad coffee afterwards. Even worse conversation about whether coffee could technically be considered a weapon. It has harmed me repeatedly. You are dramatic. I am accurate. You're impossible. And yet, Zale looked at her. And yet, neither finished the sentence. They didn't need to. For years, Caudalia had believed survival was the highest achievement. Stay alive. Stay powerful. Stay untouchable. Zale had believed the same. Stay alert. Stay ready. Stay alive. But somewhere between a hidden apartment and a war fought in tailored suits, they had discovered something neither woman expected. Survival was not the same as living. Living was slower. Messier. More terrifying. Because survival required armor. Living required trust. That night, when Caudalia finally went to sleep, Zale did not sit by the window. She did not guard the door. She did not wait for danger. She slept. Not because the world was safe. The world never was. But because, for the first time in years, she believed someone else would watch too. No more ghosts. No more hiding. No more pretending they were only weapons built for war. 2 women. 2 survivors. 2 people learning the strangest lesson of all. Sometimes the hardest battle was believing you deserved a life after winning the war. Chapter 15. The Queen Comes Home. Caudalia Pellegrini had negotiated billion-dollar acquisitions. She had faced rival families who wanted her dead. She had stared down people who believed fear was the only language worth speaking. None of those things had unsettled her as much as the woman standing in front of the kitchen counter holding 2 cups of coffee. Terrible coffee. As always. You are doing it again. Zale looked up. Doing what? Making coffee that tastes like punishment. Zale glanced at the mug. I've improved. No. I have. It is less offensive. That is improvement. Caudalia considered arguing. Then decided against it. A month ago, she would have. Today, she simply took the mug. And drank. Zale noticed. Of course she did. You didn't complain. I am evolving. I should mark the calendar. Do not become dramatic. You're the dramatic one. I am not. You once bought a company because they made a chair you disliked. The chair was badly designed. It was a chair. It was an insult. Zale smiled. And Caudalia realized something. She had spent years surrounded by people who feared her smile. Zale was the first person who simply enjoyed making her find one. The apartment was quiet. No alarms. No emergency messages. No threats. Just morning light. The kind of ordinary moment Caudalia had never understood the value of. She watched Zale move around the kitchen. Not like a soldier. Not like an operative. Just a woman making breakfast. And suddenly the thought arrived. Unexpected. Terrifying. Necessary. You're leaving. Zale stopped. Not because she was surprised. Because she had been expecting the conversation. I was going to. Caudalia looked at her. Why? The question was genuine. That was what made it dangerous. Zale placed the knife down. The job is complete. Katalea's expression changed. The job. Zale nodded. You're safe. The threats are handled. Nana's instructions were clear. Nana. Yes. Katalea sighed. Of course, this somehow involves Nana. Most things do. Unfortunately, true. A small smile. Then it disappeared. You think you have to leave because you are no longer needed. Zale did not answer. Which was an answer. Katalea stepped closer. That is not how this works. It was the agreement. No. Zale looked at her. Katalea held her gaze. That was the agreement with Lucia. A pause. The cleaner. Another. The disguise. She took a breath. But I am not asking Lucia to stay. The room became still. I am asking Zale. For perhaps the first time in her life. Katalea Pellegrini struggled to find the correct words. Not because she lacked them. Because words could not be controlled once released. I spent my entire life making sure nobody had the ability to hurt me. Zale listened. I built systems. Walls. Rules. A quiet laugh. Entire companies, actually. Naturally. I thought needing someone meant weakness. And now? Katalea looked at her. Now I think refusing to need anyone was the weakness. Zale looked away. Not because she wanted to leave. Because she was trying to understand. You don't need a protector. No. You don't need a soldier. No. You don't need someone to stand behind you. Katalea shook her head. No. A pause. That is exactly why I am asking. She walked to the table. Picked up a small object. Lucia's cleaner badge. The identity that had protected her. The identity that had hidden Zale. She placed it down. You saved my life as Lucia. Zale looked at the badge. You protected me as Captain Mercer. A pause. But I don't want either of those things. What do you want? Katalea looked at her. Not La Reina. Not the CEO. Not the woman everyone feared. Just Katalea. I want you. The words were quiet. Simple. Absolute. Zale swallowed. A tiny movement. But Katalea noticed. She always noticed. I don't know how to do this. Katalea smiled softly. Neither do I. That's unusual for you. I dislike it. Why? Because I cannot create a strategy. Zale laughed. A real laugh. Poor Katalea. Be careful. There she is. The space between them felt different. Not like a battlefield. Not like a negotiation. A choice. Zale stepped closer. What happens if I stay? Katalea answered immediately. You stay. No mission. No. No orders. No. No pretending? Katalea shook her head. No ghosts. The words landed. Because that was the promise. Not forever without danger. Not a world without pain. Just no more hiding. The first kiss was not dramatic. There was no thunder. No audience. No victory speech. Just two women standing in a quiet apartment, finally choosing each other without needing a reason. Katalea kissed her like someone discovering freedom. Zale kissed her like someone finally allowed to come home. When they pulled apart, neither moved away. That was unexpected. Katalea smiled. From you. From you. I have surprised you many times. Yes. Good. Why? Because I spent my entire life being predictable to enemies. A pause. I like being unpredictable to you. Zale smiled. I like knowing you. Then kissed her again. Later, the cleaning cart disappeared. Not destroyed. Not thrown away. Just moved into storage. Because Lucia had served her purpose. She had saved a life. She had protected a queen. But she was never meant to be the final version of Zale Mercer. Months ago, the world believed Katalea Pellegrini died in a warehouse. They were wrong. She had not died. She had shed an old version of herself. The woman who trusted only systems. The woman who carried every burden alone. The woman who believed love was simply another vulnerability to exploit. She was still La Reina. Still brilliant. Still dangerous. Still impossible. But now, she was also loved. And that was something no enemy could steal. Because the greatest victory was never surviving the war. It was finding someone you wanted beside you when the war was finally over. Cattleya Pellegrini came home. And this time, she did not come home alone. Epilogue. The woman who always knew. Nana Pellegrini had 3 rules. Never trust a man who wore shoes too clean for the streets. Never underestimate a woman who made her own pasta. And never, under any circumstances, tell Cattleya Pellegrini that you were right. The 3rd rule was the most important. Because Nana enjoyed being right. A little too much. The Pellegrini family villa had not changed. The same stone walls. The same gardens. The same ancient olive trees that had witnessed generations of arguments, celebrations, secrets, and dramatic Italian hand gestures. Especially the dramatic hand gestures. Cattleya arrived on Sunday afternoon. Without security. Without a team. Without 3 phones. Nana noticed immediately. Of course she did. She noticed everything. You're late. Cattleya looked at the clock. I am exactly on time. Exactly on time is still late in my house. Cattleya sighed. Hello, Nana. Hello, stubborn child. I am 38. You are still stubborn. That is not an age. It is in this family. Zale followed behind her. No uniform. No disguise. No cleaner's scrubs. Just Zale. Nana looked at her. Really looked at her. The way only Nana could. Not seeing the soldier. Not seeing the operative. Not seeing the legend. Seeing the woman. Finally. Zale blinked. Finally. Nana waved a hand. I was beginning to think I would die before you 2 figured it out. Cattleya stopped. Nana. What? You knew. Nana looked offended. My dear. She placed a hand over her heart. I know everything. Zale quietly smiled. Cattleya pointed at her. Do not encourage her. I wasn't. You were. I was. Lunch was loud. Because Pellegrini lunches were never simply meals. They were negotiations disguised as food. Nana insisted Zale eat more. Zale insisted she was full. Nana ignored her. Cattleya watched. Quietly. A strange feeling settled over her. Peace. Not the fragile kind. Not the kind that existed because everyone was afraid to disturb it. Real peace. The kind built from people who knew your worst parts and stayed anyway. After lunch, Nana led Cattleya into the garden, leaving Zale behind. Intentionally. Because Nana had never met a conversation she couldn't arrange. You were angry. Cattleya looked at her. At you. Obviously. You knew. I hoped. That is not the same. No. Nana touched the leaves of an olive tree. Hope is what you have when you cannot force something. Cattleya was quiet. Because that sounded very unlike the woman everyone thought Nana was. I was angry because you lied. I know. You decided for me. I know. Cattleya looked at her. And you would do it again. Nana smiled. Absolutely. Cattleya shook her head. There it is. What? The honesty. Why lie when the truth is more interesting? Despite herself. Cattleya laughed. I did not hire Zale because you were weak. Cattleya looked at her. I know. I hired her because you were strong in all the wrong ways. That made Cattleya pause. Explain. You knew how to survive. Nana looked toward the house. You knew how to win. A pause. But you did not know how to let someone stand beside you without calculating the cost. The words were gentle, which made them harder. I was afraid. Cattleya rarely admitted that, even to herself. Nana nodded. I know. That someone would betray me. Yes. That someone would use my love against me. Yes. Cattleya looked down. And? Nana smiled. My beautiful child. She touched Cataleya's cheek. Love is always a risk. A pause. But a life without risk is not a life. Behind them, Zale appeared. Not interrupting. Just waiting. Nana noticed. Of course she did. You. Zale straightened slightly. Yes. Come here. Zale approached. Nana took her hands. You did well. The words were simple. But Zale's expression changed. Because soldiers were often thanked for missions. Rarely for staying. I was doing my job. Nana shook her head. No. A pause. You were doing more than that. Zale looked away. Nana squeezed her hands. Do not spend your whole life being useful, my dear. The words landed. Be loved too. For once. Zale had no response. Neither did Cataleya. Because Nana had always been dangerous with her words. She could dismantle a person with kindness. Years later, people would tell the story differently. They would talk about Reina, the impossible queen who survived assassination. The woman who dismantled rival empires without firing a shot. The genius who built a global corporation. The legend. They would talk about Captain Zale Mercer, the ghost soldier. The protector who disappeared into the walls and emerged when the queen needed her most. They would talk about the war, the betrayal, the revenge, the victory. But the truth was much simpler. The greatest thing Nana Pellegrini ever built was not an empire. It was a bridge between a woman who knew how to command and a woman who knew how to stay. Years later, Cataleya would still complain about Nana interfering. Nana would still deny interfering. Zale would still drink terrible coffee. Cataleya would still pretend she hated it. Nobody believed her. Especially not Nana. Because Nana had known from the beginning. The queen did not need someone to save her. She needed someone who could see her. And the ghost did not need another mission. She needed somewhere to belong. So Nana did what she always did. She planted the right person in the right place. Then waited patiently. While everyone else caught up. Thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe and like this video and follow me for more stories. You are always welcome here, and leave me a comment or a thumbs up, just letting me know if you like the story and would like more, or is there perhaps an idea that you would like to share or let me write for you.